Thank you for that introduction, Rachel, and thank you to the Social Innovation Summit for creating the space and the platform to talk about such a critical topic here, the global workforce that we need. I know we heard from our poet in residence about invoking our dream and our passion. So before we dive into the conversation, let me ask everyone in this audience a question. What was your dream job when you were a kid or as an adult? I know for me, growing up in an Indian family, I had three choices. Either you can become a doctor, you can become a lawyer, or you can become an engineer. Now, I picked the last option to become an engineer, and in a fun couple of twists of fate, ended up leading the Caterpillar Foundation and focusing on social impact. Now, I will say that it's truly a dream come true, but I also know the reality is that many kids don't have the same learning opportunity that I did. And that's why I'm truly passionate about doing the work that we do at the Caterpillar Foundation. Now, many of you know Caterpillar as the company that builds sustainable infrastructure in the communities we live and work. Or if you're a parent, your child probably has a construction truck that's their favorite toy. So we go from toys all the way to heavy equipment machinery. But what you may not know is that we're also building sustainable infrastructure for the human capital in workforce development. So I'm really excited to talk to Jeff and Ginger about what we're doing in our partnership and to really build that infrastructure for the workforce. You know, we talked about workforce and the skills gap that we have and the training that we need, but we need much more than that. We need an ecosystem-based approach. So if there are three things that I want you to take away from this conversation is, how are we building that ecosystem-based approach? How are we designing for inclusion? And the third and the most important is, how are we scaling this for what works? So with that, Jeff, I'm going to start with you. We have a great partnership with ISACA focused on this ecosystem-based approach, from the favelas in Brazil to the underserved communities in the United States. Tell us about how ISACA is approaching this, as well as why are you uniquely positioned to be focused on this infrastructure approach?
No, it's a great question. Thank you, and thank you for having us. ISACA as an organization sits at the intersection between education and the workforce, and so we talk about kind of what's the future of work look like. And I mean, how many out here have used ChatGPT? Just give me a clap. Yeah. And whoever didn't clap, I know you're not being straight with me because that tool is fantastic. So we got to prepare for it, and it's a constantly evolving tech landscape. And one of the advantages that we have as both a credentialing body and a membership organization is that we have 170,000 members. So they provide us really the knowledge, skills, and abilities that they're looking for in people that they want to hire. And we take those and turn those into credentials. So we can validate skill sets of students. We can validate skill sets of the 1 billion people that is estimated that need to be upskilled in the next upcoming years because of things like AI and IoT and blockchain.
You know, what I'm hearing you say, Jeff, is that because of ISACA being a membership-based model, you are essentially you already have built-in approaches to this ecosystem, because the students that are coming in, they get the mentorship, they get the leadership, and the employees are already there. So it's already halfway there to how you're looking at some of these solutions.
It is, and traditionally when we have these big technology changes, we call it right now the fourth industrial revolution, we usually turn to higher education, and they just don't have the capacity to do this. And just to put it in context for you, if you took every 18-year-old kid that was college eligible right now, and you times that by the the acceptance rate globally of maybe 40%, you'd have to build a number of schools at a capacity of 20,000 that would handle 20,000 students. Do you know how many schools you would have to build? Anyone want to take a guess? No? You ChatGPT it. You'd have to build 23,720 schools to be able to handle that capacity. So what we're trying to create is a more virtuous cycle where higher ed still has a place in that ecosystem, but we are trying to bring the student closer to work And by creating a more virtuous cycle where the students come in, we have the mentoring, we have the networking, we have the knowledge transfer that our members bring, because one of the things we want to do with our partner organizations is build capacity within the schools. So you don't need to be a comp sci major to teach IoT. We'll teach you how that domain knowledge, and then you can transfer it to your students. You can train your additional faculty, so we start building that capacity in the program that we want. And that gives us the ability to serve more students and scale this in a, like I said, in a virtuous way. The other part of that too is, as part of the membership, we ultimately want to see the students be successful. So we've got the mentoring, the networking, they do the soft skills work with them, but they're also, our members are probably in every top 10, Fortune 10,000 company, so then we open access to jobs, and obviously that's what we want, right? And that virtuous cycle continues, because when the students then get in, we can continue to upskill them into new and different credentials that address some of the new technologies like AI and IoT.
Yeah, and what's also exciting is because your membership has such a large footprint, it also gives an opportunity for diversity and inclusion as well. I know at the beginning I talked about sort of my family drilling in 3 opportunities for me to pick from. But what I didn't mention, and if you haven't already guessed, is that I'm Indian by background, and I was born in India, and my family didn't immigrate to the US till I was 12 years old. Now, as a child coming to the US, you always think you're moving to a thriving metropolis, but where we landed was a 1 traffic light town in rural Kentucky with 400 people, and which used to be the coal mining capital of this country. But what I realized in that, and what that gave me the perspective, is really that, although worlds apart, Kentucky and India, they seem to have similar economic challenges, because when you don't have the skills, when you don't have the pathway to employability, you are really looking at an economically depressed community, which is what I'm really excited with our partnership with ISACA. We also partner with One in Tech, which is the foundation for ISACA. So, Ginger, tell us about the mandate for One in Tech Foundation, and what are you hoping to see the change that happens with this partnership?
Yeah, I think, one of the things to put it in, kind of put it in perspective is, you talked about what is your dream. And most people here can identify it, even if it was very far away. But we're looking at populations who don't have a dream because they don't feel like anything is within their reach. They don't even consider opportunities that exist for other people because they don't see people that look like them in those roles right now. And so what One in Tech, our foundation, does, alongside and aligned with ISACA's objectives, are we look at those underserved and under-resourced and underrepresented populations. How do we build these pathways for them? And again, just like Asha said, the things that we look for is we want to, design this for inclusion. We have to think about the populations that we're going to serve in order to make programs that are accessible and applicable to them. And I think that's where ISACA comes in. We're global. We can we have 220 chapters around the world, so we can work with our chapters and build ecosystems in those particular communities around the world so that the programming we build is applicable. It's not a one-size-fits-all type programming. And so, our mission is really around providing pathways through education, but, ultimately work for these underserved and underrepresented populations.
That's fantastic. And if I recall this correctly, we are hitting a milestone with our chapter in Brazil with 600 students that are going to be graduating from the first cohort. Just exciting to see the opportunity that they will have, as well as what they can do to pay it forward for those coming behind them. So tell us about how that works in the U.S.
Yeah, this is, in the US, we're doing programs with the Caterpillar Foundation. They brought the idea to us where they want to serve, Caterpillar Foundation would like to serve 5 communities, or 5 cities within the US. And these are cities that are, that have a high population of need. And so the first thing we did was to look at this designing with inclusion in mind. And so the cities that were served were looking at, what are the poverty rates, what are the demographics, but also what's on a bus line, and what are some of the challenges that these particular students are going to face. So again, and I apologize, I got to go back a little bit, but in these 5 cities, we're doing certification training, stackable certifications that can then be translated into jobs. They're kind of open doors for jobs. But we're also partnering with other nonprofits and communities and corporations in those areas that can then provide these access ways to jobs. These programs are designed for those who are really under-resourced and underserved. We're not even requiring a high school education to get into these programs, because we know these systemic problems keep people out of high school. And you can't just start there. Same with higher ed. You can't say everybody has to have gone to college, because starting, we all know, before pre-K, there's systemic barriers built into the education system. So let's look at what are these barriers from way back in the pipeline and start providing and designing programs that will serve those populations in a truly accessible way.
That's really fantastic to hear. So there's so much of localization that happens. So we talked about building an ecosystem, and we talked about inclusion design. How do you scale this?
Well, it's the intersection between the work that we do, the members that we have, and the chapters that help us enable that. Mm-hmm. So again, from the programs that we're doing, we'll bring chapter members to come in to be instructors. We'll find local faculty that we can enable and provide them the domain knowledge so that they can teach the course. And that's the cycle that we want to create. So we're always upskilling the ones that are going to train, students get trained, and we take them through that cycle again.
That's really fantastic. So the collective forces of all of this should really yield us with an ecosystem-based approach. And Ginger, any final thoughts for our audience here?
I think just to kind of hammer home those points about, if you're looking at program development and you're looking to really create pathways, be strategic about it. And have, again, those 3 pillars are key, to build an ecosystem. We cannot do it all, like one organization cannot do this. One foundation cannot do this. You have to build an ecosystem. And that ecosystem with all the partners has to be designed to be truly inclusive. Don't just mark a box. Of course we're inclusive. We invite everybody. That's not inclusion. And then again, what's working and how do you scale up?
That's really fantastic. So you heard it here, folks. It's about building the ecosystem. It's about designing for that inclusion and also looking at scale. I know I'd asked you at the top of this conversation about, what's your dream job? I think the bigger question we need to ask is, for every child that has the same dream job, do we have the systems in place? Yep. And the reality is that it's still a work in progress. And as Ginger, you mentioned, it requires radical collaboration with uncommon partners and unlike minds really coming together to do it. So as we say at Caterpillar, let's do the work. Thank you, everybody.